20 Las Vegas jobs that no longer exist. Las Vegas, the city of dazzling neon lights, luxurious casinos, and never-ending dreams. But hidden beneath that glamour is a mysterious history, where countless unique professions once existed, shaping the Sin City of a bygone era, then gradually fading into oblivion. Today, we will travel back in time to discover the strange and sometimes controversial jobs that visitors today can hardly imagine. Atomic Test View, Tour Guides. Can you imagine if in the 1950s, upon arriving in Las Vegas, a city we now know for its glittering casinos and spectacular shows, your guide suggested a trip to see an atomic bomb test? Sounds unrealistic, right? But that was a real profession, even quite popular at the time. Just about 65 miles from Las Vegas, the Nevada test site began above-ground explosions in 1951. Immediately, the city turned it into a tourist specialty. Guides would take visitors to desert hilltops, hand out protective sunglasses, and enthusiastically introduce them to the wonder of nuclear science. The giant mushroom clouds rising into the sky were advertised as spectacular light shows. Even major hotels didn't miss this opportunity. The Desert Inn's Sky Room was once an ideal spot for bomb viewing, where visitors could enjoy atomic cocktails while watching the explosions from a distance. People even created atomic-named cocktails to serve tourists, creating an atmosphere that was both exciting and a little eerie. Even more surprisingly, many guides even asserted that these radioactive light shows were completely safe for visitors. In the 1950s, tour companies, including the Atomic Energy Commission, hired these guides. Although they only received a modest basic salary, they earned significant tips from visitors who were amazed and excited by the extraordinary sight. However, this unique job effectively ended in 1963, when the Limited Test Ban Treaty was signed, officially prohibiting all above-ground nuclear tests. Showgirl Performers. With dazzling feathered and jeweled costumes, showgirls graced magnificent stages, performing intricate dances and showcasing their physical beauty, becoming the embodiment of Sin City's characteristic splendor and allure. Their presence transformed variety shows into a unique cultural feature, attracting millions of visitors to the city. At their peak in the 70s, many casinos hired hundreds of showgirls to perform in large nightly shows. Top performers could earn astounding incomes, totaling over 6 figures in current value, with tips from customers and additional appearances at special events significantly contributing to their earnings. This was a prestigious and high-income profession for those with talent and beauty. However, the entertainment landscape of Las Vegas changed significantly in the 90s. New, innovative, and more artistic productions like Cirque du Soleil, along with major musical performances by famous artists, gradually replaced traditional variety shows. Changes in audience tastes and global entertainment trends made showgirl shows less appealing. By the 2000s, most of these shows had closed, with the last major performance, Jubilee, officially ceasing operation in 2016. Western Frontier-era actors. When Las Vegas was still a small developing town, Wild West culture had a strong influence. Western Frontier-era actors were professional performers, including cowboys and gold prospectors, who walked around town with guns on their hips, bringing excitement and the atmosphere of the Wild West. Western-themed establishments like Bonnie Springs Ranch hired them to perform in Wild West shows, reenacting thrilling gunfights, saloon brawls, mock hangings, and engaging comedic performances. They were an important part of the entertainment tourism industry, providing visitors with vivid experiences of a bygone era. Experienced performers in this role earned a modest yet significant living. Their income was supplemented by tips they received after performances and from taking photos with visitors. This personal interaction enhanced the tourist experience and encouraged them to spend more. As Las Vegas modernized and transformed into a global entertainment hub with luxurious resorts and world-class shows, the demand for Western-themed entertainment significantly declined. The change in tourist tastes made these traditional performances less appealing than before. By the 90s, many actors had ridden off into the sunset as job opportunities in this field gradually dried up. Bonnie Springs Ranch, one of the last famous venues to maintain this type of entertainment, closed in 2019 after 60 years of operation. Change Girls. If you had ever set foot in Las Vegas decades ago, the most distinctive sound wasn't the clinking of slot machines, but the jingle of coins. The source of that sound was the Change Girls, women who walked the casino floor with metal aprons heavy with coins, sometimes up to 30 pounds of metal worn around their waists, along with stacks of neatly arranged paper money. They weren't just mobile cashiers, they were literally mobile banks. Their physical endurance was astonishing. Back pain was a common occupational hazard, with many suffering chronic pain after just a few years. Despite the hardship, this was a highly sought-after position. A skilled change girl working in a high-stakes area could earn more in tips than even highly educated professionals. A former change girl who worked at the Sands in the 60s earned enough in tips in one weekend to pay her monthly house mortgage. They possessed extraordinary memory, remembering high rollers, their favorite gaming machines, and VIP guests who needed immediate service. They even served as a mobile security system, noting suspicious individuals and reporting them to management. However, technology killed this iconic profession. The introduction of the ticket in, ticket out (TITO) system in the late 90s eliminated the need for physical coins. By 2005, this position had almost disappeared from the Las Vegas Strip. Keno Runners. Before the era of smartphones and video games, Keno was a lottery-style game that became an icon associated with Las Vegas casinos. This game originated from ancient China, brought to the West by Chinese immigrants in the 19th century as they worked on the Transcontinental Railroad and settled in Las Vegas. Keno particularly appealed to older players and allowed them to place bets and then continue other casino activities while waiting for results. To serve this demand, Keno Runners emerged. They were casino employees with a unique combination of physical stamina, extraordinary memory, and customer service skills. Their job required constant movement, perpetual motion, running continuously between the Keno Lounge and every corner of the casino, from restaurants, bars, pool areas, to restrooms. Their main goal was to collect marked Keno tickets from players who didn't want to leave their meals or drinks to place bets. After collecting, they would quickly take the tickets to the Keno Lounge before the draw began, and then bring winnings back to the players. Keno Runners had to have incredible memory. A good Keno runner could remember dozens of favorite numbers of regular players, recognize them instantly, and know exactly how they wanted to play. Some experienced runners could even complete a customer's ticket without asking, just based on facial recognition. Physically, they could travel up to 15 miles, about 24 kilometers, in a single shift, constantly weaving through crowded casino floors. At their peak in the 70s, Las Vegas had a few hundred Keno runners. The basic income of Keno runners was about $4 an hour in the 70s, but their main source came from tips, especially if they helped players win big. Many superstitious players believed that certain Keno runners brought good luck and would personally request their service, even willing to wait for their lucky runner instead of placing bets with others. If you could go back in time, which of these vanished professions would you most like to experience? Let us know. Cigarette girls. As one of the most prominent and glamorous symbols of Las Vegas's allure, cigarette girls were a familiar sight on casino floors from the late 40s. Inspired by similar positions in nightclubs, they gracefully navigated the casino floor in distinctive, often form-fitting and alluring outfits, selling cigarettes, cigars, and sometimes candy from trays worn around their necks. They were not just salespeople, they were part of the entertainment experience, an element that created the luxurious and classy atmosphere of the casino. The basic income of cigarette girls was quite minimal, but their tips were exceptionally generous. A skilled cigarette girl who knew how to build relationships with customers and worked in high-stakes areas could earn more in a weekend than many casino managers earned in a week. This made them one of the best-paying service jobs in Las Vegas at the time, despite their low basic salary. Beyond their sales role, cigarette girls also performed many other special functions. They were mobile marketing tools, attracting attention and creating a friendly atmosphere. They also acted as psychological operators, recognizing customers' moods and knowing how to approach them. More importantly, they sometimes served as the eyes and ears of casino security. They were trained to detect cheaters, professional card counters, and potential troublemakers, contributing to maintaining fairness and safety on the casino floor. The position of cigarette girl began to decline as societal perceptions of smoking changed. Smoking became less accepted in public spaces, and indoor smoking restrictions began to be implemented. Board persons. Before digital screens transformed the sports betting industry, Las Vegas casinos employed special professionals known as board persons. Their job was to manually record betting numbers on giant blackboards, later whiteboards, that covered an entire wall. This wasn't just about writing numbers. It was a combination of art, mathematics, and even a performance. Imagine the scene. In a bustling sports area, hundreds of bettors glued to the numbers. There, agile, board persons, with perfect handwriting skills, created uniform, easy-to-read numbers from every angle of the lounge. They developed unique shorthand systems to quickly update dozens of matches as odds changed throughout the day. They were not just scribes, but also deeply knowledgeable sports enthusiasts. A good board person needed to instantly recognize team abbreviations, understand different types of odds like money lines, point spreads, and over-unders. They had to be extremely sharp-eyed to catch their own mistakes before savvy bettors could exploit them, as a small error could cost the casino thousands of dollars. When breaking news affected a match, for example, a key player injury or unexpected weather, board persons had to update dozens of betting lines almost simultaneously as odds changed across multiple different matches. During major events like March Madness or NFL Sundays, they could perform hundreds of updates in a single shift, while eager bettors waited to place their wagers based on their work. Sometimes, they even had to stand on ladders to reach the top rows of the giant boards. Like many other characteristic Vegas professions, this job gradually began to disappear in the 90s when electronic boards were introduced, initially as supplements, then completely replacing manual boards. By the early 2000s, even the most traditional sports betting areas had switched to digital screens, which could be updated from a computer. Showroom Captains. In the era of the Rat Pack in Las Vegas, getting the best seats for a show wasn't about booking tickets online in advance, but about knowing the right person and having a suitable amount of cash ready. That person was the Showroom Captain. They weren't mere ushers, but powerful kingpins, the gatekeepers of the Vegas entertainment industry. Officially, they managed seating for casino showrooms, but unofficially, they controlled who sat where through a complex system of tips and favors operating outside the casino's official reservation system. Their attire was always formal, either a tuxedo or a polite suit, with the demeanor of military officers. However, the 80s brought computerized reservation systems with numbered seats. Corporations took over Vegas and eliminated positions that operated based on tips rather than transparent policies. By the early 90s, the era of slipping a captain $50 for a better seat to watch Frank Sinatra had ended. Today, Las Vegas shows use the same ticketing systems as any Broadway theater. The art of schmoozing that showroom captains once mastered has been replaced by algorithms and efficiency. Pit boss. A pit boss was a powerful and indispensable position in Las Vegas casinos during their golden age. They were responsible for overseeing a group of table games, typically including 4 to 8 blackjack, craps, or roulette tables. The role of a pit boss wasn't limited to personnel management. They supervised dealers, closely monitored for any signs of cheating, resolved disputes between players in the house, and most importantly, evaluated player value to determine the comps, complimentary services, freebies, they could receive from the casino. To do this job well, a pit boss needed extensive specialized knowledge of game rules, betting procedures, and various cheating techniques. They had to be able to detect unusual behavior and make quick decisions in a high-pressure environment. Additionally, an astonishing memory was a crucial requirement. Pit bosses had to remember betting patterns, win-loss histories, and personal details of hundreds of regular players, helping them make appropriate comp decisions and build relationships with VIP customers. Pit bosses possessed special authority and significant autonomy. They had the discretion to comp services such as free hotel rooms, meals at luxury restaurants, show tickets, and even airline tickets on the spot, based on their personal assessment of a player's value to the casino. This authority made them highly influential in retaining and attracting high rollers, who contributed significant revenue to the casino. These systems could accurately and automatically calculate comps based on data collected from customer gameplay, eliminating the need for personal judgment. This eroded the personalization and power once associated with the pit boss role. Proposition players. Props. In the world of gambling, an empty table is never a desired sight for a casino. It creates a dull, inactive feeling and fails to attract customers. To remedy this, especially in poker rooms, a unique profession emerged: proposition players, or props for short. They were professional card players secretly paid by the casino to keep games running when tables were empty, creating an illusion of activity and excitement. Props did not play with the house's money. Instead, the casino provided them with a bankroll, usually ranging from $1,000 to $5,000, for them to play with their own money. If they won, they kept the winnings. If they lost, they incurred losses from that bankroll. In return, they received a fixed hourly fee from the casino, regardless of the game's outcome. Their primary goal was not to win money from the casino, but to keep the tables sufficiently populated to attract real players. This job required a subtle acting skill. Props had to have a genuine poker face, pretending to be normal players, with no one knowing they were casino employees. They needed to develop complex backstories about themselves, about why they were in Las Vegas, so no one would suspect their true role. They had to blend into the atmosphere of the table, conversing with other players as if they were ordinary patrons. A significant reason for the disappearance of props in poker was the consolidation of poker rooms. Larger casinos began building massive poker rooms, attracting a larger volume of players, reducing the need to fill tables with employees. Which of these professions surprised you the most? Tell us your thought in below. Shills. If proposition players were hired to keep tables occupied and create atmosphere, shills were a more deceptive version, yet an indispensable part of early Las Vegas from the 1940s to the 1970s. Shills were casino employees who played with the house's money, pretending to be normal players, but with the specific purpose of creating an illusion of bustling activity and big wins, thereby attracting real players to the table. Shills were provided money by the casino to play. They would sit at a table, often blackjack or craps, and start playing like a normal person. Their goal was to create a positive image, pretending to win continuously, expressing joy when winning and complaining when losing, but still appearing to be winning overall. They might say things like, "Oh, this table is hot," "Swing, I won big today," "Zrinya," or "Come join, luck is smiling," to entice passersby. They received an hourly wage plus bonuses based on the number of real players they attracted to the table. This incentivized them to perform convincingly. Skilled shills also needed keen psychological skills. They had to quickly identify potential players, strike up natural conversations, and cleverly encourage them to join the game. They were masters of psychological manipulation, knowing how to read customer hesitation and transform it into an eagerness to try their luck. The use of shills, which was inherently a form of open deception, even if it didn't directly cheat game outcomes, no longer fit the industry's new image and ethical standards. By the 90s, most major casinos had officially stopped using shills, marking the end of an era where the line between reality and illusion in casinos was sometimes quite blurred. Boxman. With the cheers of players, the clatter of dice, and the click of chips, the craps table was the center of excitement. And at the heart of that craps table, a powerful figure sat at ease, controlling everything. The Boxman. The craps table manager. The Boxman sat in the center of the craps table, opposite the stickman, who used a long stick to move dice and chips, and between two dealers. This position gave them an overview of the entire game. The Boxman's primary responsibility was to protect the casino's chips, ensuring there was no confusion or fraud in payouts. They were the final arbiter of any disputes arising at the table, the enforcer of proper procedures, and the quality controller for all craps operations. Every problem, every question, every incident was brought to the Boxman for resolution. A good Boxman needed to master knowledge of craps rules, betting procedures, and especially the most sophisticated cheating techniques. They had to be able to detect uneven dice throws, which could be due to cheating or unintentional, incorrect payouts by dealers, or any suspicious betting patterns instantly. Given the fast pace of the craps game, they had to have extremely quick reflexes and the ability to process information from multiple sources simultaneously. Thanks to their special authority, the Boxman could overturn dealer payout decisions if errors were found, invalidate dice rolls they deemed irregular, and even ban players from the table for serious rule violations. They were the one who maintained order and fairness at the craps table, ensuring profit for the casino. Coolers. According to casino folklore, these individuals were hired because they possessed extraordinary bad luck, a powerful negative energy so strong that it could break other players' winning streaks just by their presence at the table. This story sounds fantastical, but it partly reflects the superstitious psychology of the gambling world. However, in reality, coolers were hired for the psychological impact they brought, not for any supernatural energy. They were usually middle-aged men with ordinary appearances, but who were thoroughly trained in distraction techniques. Their role was to employ subtle techniques to break the focus and rhythm of players who were winning big, those who were hot and seemed unbeatable. This could include accidentally striking up conversations at critical moments of a game, asking complex mathematical questions to distract the player's thinking, or causing minor annoyances like accidentally bumping the table, spilling chips, or making unwanted noises. Some coolers even deliberately played poorly to annoy or confuse experienced players, causing them to lose focus on their game. The ultimate goal was to make the winning player lose confidence and their winning rhythm, thereby returning the game to the house's advantage. The cooler position originated in mafia-run casinos in the 50s and continued to exist in various forms until the 70s. The shift towards professional corporate management and stricter regulations eliminated opaque positions based on psychological warfare, methods like coolers. They became part of Las Vegas's underground history. Switchboard operators. In the era before digital technology developed, switchboard operators were an essential part of the smooth operation of Las Vegas casino hotels. They managed large cord switchboards, connecting hundreds of in-room calls, handling wake-up requests, and serving as the hub for all internal and external communications. Their job required high concentration and multitasking ability, especially in a constantly busy environment like a casino hotel. Interestingly, they often facilitated communications that could be related to potentially illegal activities outside the state, revealing a part of Las Vegas's past when underground operations were more common. Experienced operators needed to possess extremely good listening and voice recognition skills. They could identify celebrities just by their voice and knew exactly which guests should never be connected directly to their rooms, no matter who was calling. This ability to discern and discretion was incredibly important, especially when handling sensitive calls or those involving influential figures. Experienced union switchboard operators earned up to $7,500 per year. Although this was a modest income compared to some other positions in the gambling industry, it provided stable employment with reasonable benefits. The disappearance of switchboard operators was a result of technological advancements in the telecommunications industry. By the 80s, many hotels and casinos had begun using automatic PBX private branch exchange systems, allowing calls to be connected directly without human intervention. By the early 2000s, computer-generated wake-up calls and direct dial telephone systems became the standard, completely eliminating the traditional switchboard position. Do you think technology has stripped the city of its magic? Let us know in the comments. Casino entertainment booking agents. Casino entertainment booking agents were immensely powerful figures. They had the ability to make or break artists' careers, while also ensuring that the party never stopped at their establishments, transforming these casinos into must-visit destinations for tourists. Before large corporations took over, they were truly the kings of the Las Vegas Strip, holding significant control over the city's entertainment landscape. Their duties were incredibly diverse and complex. They included scouting new talent, negotiating performance contracts with artists and their representatives, meticulously scheduling performances, and most importantly, keeping artists satisfied and ready to perform. This required not only negotiation skills, but also the ability to manage relationships and resolve emerging issues. Approximately 100 booking agents worked in Las Vegas during the hotel and casino boom of the 50s and 60s. The Sands Hotel was known as the largest employer for this position, demonstrating its central role in shaping the city's entertainment industry. The position of casino entertainment booking agent gradually declined. The main reason was that when large corporations acquired casinos, they began centralizing entertainment decisions, shifting power from individual agents to larger departments and centralized processes. This transformed the entertainment industry from a model based on personal relationships to a corporate model, which was more efficient but less personalized. Race and sports bookmakers. Race and sports bookmakers, or odds makers, were living computers with sharp intuition, capable of determining the financial fate of thousands daily. They were considered the wizards who set odds to help sportsbooks profit, while also balancing risk and attracting players. Their work required keen insight and extensive knowledge of sports. Their skills included analyzing teams, assessing athlete injuries, considering weather conditions, and setting initial betting lines, all done without the aid of computers or instant data as is available today. They had to rely on experience, intuition, and the ability to manually analyze data. This made their role extremely important and required a deep understanding of sports and betting psychology. When computer modeling and online betting platforms developed strongly in the 2000s, the role of in-house bookmakers significantly declined. Complex algorithms and automated data analysis systems could calculate odds faster, more accurately, and much more efficiently than humans. By the mid-2010s, most casinos had switched to algorithm-based odds setting, rendering the traditional race and sports bookmakers' position obsolete. Casino floor photographers. For a period, casino floor photographers were an indispensable part of the Las Vegas casino experience. They roamed the casino floor with bulky cameras and dazzling flashes, ready to capture memorable vacation moments for visitors. In particular, they would appear immediately after a significant win, photographing radiant players next to slot machines or craps tables, preserving their moment of glory. Experienced photographers possessed a special ability. They could sense or know who was about to win, and always had their finger ready on the shutter button to capture that moment. This showed their keen insight and ability to read the atmosphere on the casino floor. The number of casino floor photographers sharply declined in the late 90s with the rise of personal consumer cameras. As cameras became more widespread and accessible to the public, visitors could take their own commemorative photos without needing the services of a professional photographer. Today, a casino may still hire an authorized photographer for advertising or special event purposes, but the use of personal phones for photography in casinos is generally advised with caution due to privacy and security concerns. Faro card dealers. Faro was once one of America's most popular card games, with origins in Wild West casinos. Faro card dealers were the ones who oversaw this fast-paced game, managing bets and paying out players. Speed and accuracy were essential skills to keep the game running smoothly. At its peak in the late 40s, nearly 100 Faro dealers worked in Las Vegas, and they could earn up to $150 per week. This was a well-paying job at the time, reflecting the game's popularity and the demand for professional dealers. However, the game of Faro quickly fell out of favor. Partly, this was because it was notorious for cheating, causing players to lose trust. Additionally, it was gradually replaced by other table games that required more skill and were considered fairer, such as poker and blackjack. The last known Faro table in Vegas closed in 1955 at Binion's Horseshoe, marking the end of an era for this classic card game. 20. Forgotten jobs that no longer exist. There was a time when mornings began with a milkman's whistle and evenings ended by the flicker of a lamplighter's flame. In this quiet little journey, we'll rediscover 25 everyday jobs, once woven into the rhythm of life, that have gently faded into the folds of history. Come, let's remember them together. Gas station attendants. Who recalls pulling into a gas station and meeting a man who greeted you like an old neighbor, not a stranger? In the years when road maps were folded in glove compartments and cross-country trips meant diner stops and postcards, gas station attendants held a quiet post along the nation's highways. With polished caps, worn cloths over their shoulders, and a watchful eye on your radiator, they offered a kind of service stitched with care. A full tank came with a clean windshield, a tire check, and sometimes a chat about weather fronts or baseball scores. Their stations, often perched at the edge of town or beside a two-lane road, offered more than fuel. They offered pause. Drivers stepped out, stretched their legs, and trusted the man at the pump to notice what needed fixing. Over time, hands gave way to card readers, and those voices faded under the hum of automation. Yet for decades, that small ritual made the open road a little more human and a little less hurried. If you enjoyed this little walk through history, give the video a like and hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories coming your way. Milkman. Before kitchens smelled of toast and coffee, a man in a white cap had already made his rounds. The milkman didn't knock, didn't wait. He simply moved from house to house, carrying a clinking rack of glass bottles and a rhythm known by heart. From the 1920s into the 1970s, he was part of the street's pulse, arriving with dairy fresh from the farm and a nod that said all was well. On porches, families left empty bottles and penciled notes. More cream for Sunday, maybe butter by Thursday. Children recognized the shape of his truck. Adults trusted his timing more than their clocks. His route was routine, but the presence behind it never was. He knew whose dog barked at the fence, whose gate stuck in the frost. Over time, Wide grocery aisles replaced front steps, and automated schedules pushed aside personal calls. The milkman gave way, not out of failure, but because the world decided faster was better. Still, his part in the old morning remains, stitched between screen doors and sunrise. Knife sharpeners. You could tell he was coming by the faint jingle echoing off brick walls and shaded porches. The knife sharpener, cart in tow, moved at a steady pace, whetstone strapped behind him like a traveling promise. In kitchens where the bread was sliced by hand and vegetables trimmed with care, his trade mattered. Steel kissed stone in a slow, purposeful rhythm, and with each turn of the wheel, a blade found its edge again. Housewives waited with paring knives wrapped in cotton cloth. Butchers leaned from doorways, cleavers in hand. His craft wasn't showy, but it fed families and kept fingers safe. By the 1960s, his path had begun to shorten. Supermarkets filled shelves with plastic alternatives, and stainless steel grew cheaper than labor. As homes traded sharpening for replacement, the old wheel stopped turning. Yet those who knew him recall more than tools made keen. They remember the way a single tradesman once stitched usefulness into everyday life, with sparks flying and hands sure of their work. If you could try one of these old jobs for a day, which would you pick? Elevator operators. Have you ever stepped into an elevator and wished it could speak to you? Not with digital voices or floor numbers, but with warmth. Something real, something human. In decades past, deep inside department stores and grand hotels, a uniformed figure stood by the controls, greeting riders with a nod, perhaps a light-hearted remark, and a practiced hand on the lever. Their job required more than mechanics. It asked for composure, timing, and a touch of grace. Mornings began with going up, and afternoons ended with street level, sir. Riders stepped in, strangers, and by the fifth floor were smiling over shared thoughts or weather woes. These brief exchanges made each trip less routine, more grounded in human rhythm. Over time, machines replaced the person, and the ride grew swifter, if a little colder. What was once a ride through stories and small courtesies has become a quiet ascent from one steel door to the next. And yet, those who recall that era often carry it with them, in gestures, in manners, in how they greet the day. Film projection. The movie didn't begin on the screen. It began up in the booth, behind a pane of glass, where a lone figure stood surrounded by reels, splicers, and humming machines. The film projectionist, part technician, part artist, worked in shadows while the stories lit up the faces below. With practiced hands, they fed celluloid through projectors, aligned frames with precision, and caught skips before anyone noticed. From newsreels to westerns, from black and white drama to Saturday morning cartoons, every showing depended on their rhythm. They cued scenes with the patience of a watchmaker, timing everything down to the frame. Through their effort, theaters became portals, offering escape, laughter, wonder. But as the decades passed, film gave way to digits. The whir of reels and flicker of tape disappeared behind screens run by computers and automation. The projectionist, once essential, gave up the booth to technology. Yet their hands helped shape the golden age of cinema, frame by frame, in a world where storytelling relied not on software, but on skill, timing, and care for every beam of light. Newspaper delivery boys. Do you remember when headlines rode on the breath of a child running down a sidewalk at sunrise? Through much of the 20th century, the newsboy was part of the city's rhythm. Feet on pavement, cap pulled down, a stack of ink-stamped stories cradled under one arm. His voice carried through crowded avenues and narrow alleys, turning every corner into a bulletin board. With each cry of extra, extra exclamation mark. Component placement, he brought updates from distant shores and local ballparks, stitching towns together with folded paper and urgency. He knew which porches got 2 copies, which doorsteps wanted their news early. The front page meant morning coffee because of him. As printing presses roared and bicycles sped down side streets, his role held firm, delivering not opinions, but access. But technology, as it often does, found a quieter way. The shouts faded. News traveled faster, but lost its hands and its feet. And the boy with the headlines became part of history, one whose stride once connected the world to every doorstep. Soda jerks. Afternoons once drifted slower, and on Main Street, beneath striped awnings and tin signs, the soda fountain stood like a gathering place carved from time. Behind the counter, the soda jerk worked with practiced ease, sleeves pushed up, a twinkle in the eye, serving up cherry cokes and malted milkshakes with the same care a violinist gives his bow. He didn't speak much poetry, but his hands did, whisking syrups, spinning scoops, pulling levers, each gesture stitched into the fabric of the day. Teenagers leaned on stools, exchanging stories between sips. Old men tapped out checkers beside the clink of glass and laughter that rolled easily through the air. These counters, lined with chrome and chatter, weren't built to impress, but to welcome. As the decades wore on and fast food chains painted every town in sameness, the soda jerk stepped off his stage. Yet somewhere between vanilla swirls and vinyl seats, his presence lingers, not in memory, but in the way a place once belonged to people and how people belonged to it. Ice delivery men. Can you recall a world where staying cool meant listening for the creak of wagon wheels and the scrape of tongs on frozen block? From the early 1900s into the 1950s, the Iceman made his way through neighborhoods with a daily cargo that softened summer's edge. He wore thick gloves and carried steel tongs, his back bent not from burden, but from steady repetition. Children waited barefoot on porches, eager for a shard chipped from a melting block. Kitchens welcomed him with swinging doors and nods of familiarity. His deliveries did more than chill the butter. They marked the hour, framed the routine, kept households running through the swelter. Each stop brought relief, a pause in the heat, a small piece of modern convenience handed down by hand. As refrigerators found their place in every kitchen corner, the route grew shorter, the names on the list fewer. What once required muscle and timing now came from a switch on the wall, and so the Iceman vanished, leaving only a trail once carved by grit and frost, hand-painted billboard artists. Not so long ago, drivers along America's highways looked up and saw brushstrokes, not pixels. High above the roar of engines, artists balanced on narrow planks, palette in one hand, brush in the other, shaping billboards as though painting skies. Dressed in overalls spattered with pigment, they envisioned each advertisement as a fleeting mural, bold letters sketched freehand, faces emerging from thick strokes, backgrounds blended by eye. During the 1980s, these canvases crowned city skylines, adding character to steel and concrete landscapes. Brand messages carried weight, not through zeros on a screen, but through the warmth of human touch. From sunrise to dusk, passers-by watched patterns form, seasons wash over highway walls, and familiar landmarks take on a painter's nuance. Then came digital printers and LCD panels, offering speed at the expense of craftsmanship. As LED grids replaced rolling paint, the artist's ascent ended. Yet for a precious run of years, roadways transformed into outdoor galleries where every passing mile offered a study in color, form, and devotion to craft. Video store clerks. Friday nights brought their own kind of ceremony, a walk beneath humming lights, the soft creak of a glass door, and a familiar greeting from someone who knew your favorite directors by heart. From the late 1970s into the early 2000s, the video store clerk stood behind the counter not as a cashier, but as a curator of stories. Shelves brimmed with plastic cases, each one a silent promise of laughter, suspense, or heartbreak. Customers wandered through genres while clerks shared trivia, swapped opinions, and steered folks toward forgotten gems. A recommendation might come with a smile, a warning, or a tale of that one overlooked scene worth watching twice. These exchanges stitched the store into the fabric of neighborhoods. Families debated picks in real time, while regulars returned each week to chat and choose again. Then came streaming, efficient, faceless, fast. Rows of titles gave way to menus and algorithms, and the clerk, once a fixture in our movie nights, stepped away as the screens kept rolling without them. Switchboard operators. The heartbeat of a town once pulsed through rows of blinking lights and the steady rhythm of trained hands at the switchboard. From the jazz clubs of the 1920s to the televisions humming in post-war living rooms, operators sat at their panels like conductors guiding conversation. With cords in motion and headsets firmly in place, they patched voices from one corner of the country to another, fast, exact, and always listening. In small towns, they did more than connect calls. They noticed who dialed often, who hadn't called in days, and who whispered instead of spoke. They became keepers of passing stories, stitching together local lives with global chatter. Their work carried urgency during storms, tenderness during farewells, and routine on every other day. But technology advanced, as it always does. Rotary gave way to automation, and the rooms once filled with chatter dimmed. The operators hung up their headsets, their voices replaced by tones and prompts. Yet for decades, their hands brought people closer, one line at a time. Telegraph operators. The world once moved by wire and pulse, carried not by voice but by the quick, deliberate tap of a finger. In small offices behind swinging doors and under high windows, telegraph operators leaned over brass keys, turning letters into dots and dashes that stitched nations together. Each message passed through their hands with care: a farmer's order for seed, a soldier's final word, a president's command. Their language required no ink, no paper, only skill and silence. Railways relied on them to avoid disaster. Newsrooms waited on their signals to break headlines. From the 1850s into the early 20th century, they sat at the center of commerce, war, and conversation, often unnoticed but always essential. The discipline was precise, the pace demanding, and the consequences real. But as rotary phones spun and wires stretched in new directions, their posts thinned. The keys stopped clicking, and the stations emptied. What they gave, though, speed, trust, connection, shaped the path we travel still, long after their wires went cold. Lamplighters. Evenings used to arrive not with a switch, but with a man and a flame. Lamplighters stepped into the dusk with measured pace, lifting their poles skyward, coaxing flickers of gaslight into steady glow. Each lamp they touched stretched its reach into the street below. Calm, golden, and steady. These men carried more than fire. They carried responsibility. They checked valves, trimmed wicks, and cleaned glass casings so the city could breathe easily once the sun dipped low. From the 18th century into the early 1900s, their work shaped how cities welcomed the dark, through labor, not automation. Whether rain soaked their coats or frost clung to their lashes, they showed up, marking time by the light they brought. Some walked the same route for decades, their steps a nightly rhythm known to dogs and shopkeepers alike. Then electric wires began to weave through city walls, and bulbs flickered to life with no hand required. But for many years, dusk belonged to those who climbed ladders and lifted light into the night. Water carriers. How did families once greet the day when thirst couldn't be quenched with a twist of the tap? In alleys where cobblestones bore the weight of commerce and chatter, the water carrier made his way with a yoke across his shoulders, buckets swinging with every stride. His route wasn't marked on any map, yet every household counted on his arrival. He moved through courtyards, ducked under awnings, nodded to bakers and barbers, delivering not only water but whispers of city life. Clay pots clinked behind him, pulled by carts or balanced by hand, filled at public wells or distant springs. This work demanded grit, patience, and knowledge of who needed more after a festival or less during fasting days. In many towns, he bridged streets with routine, bound people with dependability. Then pipes were laid beneath sidewalks, and faucets clicked on with ease. The profession didn't vanish overnight, but by degrees. Still, the rhythm of daily life once hinged on the man who walked with water through morning dust and afternoon heat. Blacksmiths. The coal forge once cast its orange glow through the open doors of early workshops, where iron met fire under the steady hands of blacksmiths. These craftsmen stood at the center of community life, shaping horseshoes, wagon parts, farming tools, whatever a town needed to keep its wheels turning. Their trade required more than brute strength. It called for precision, timing, and an ear tuned to the pitch of metal under strain. Sparks flared as hammer met anvil in a rhythm older than the buildings surrounding them. They earned their place not through talk, but through results. A sharpened plow, a mended hinge, a gate that swung freely once more. Over time, the clang of handmade work gave way to factories and assembly lines. Yet the mark of the smith remains in old barns and rusted hinges, a quiet signature of a life forged from raw effort. What was once common has grown rare, but the respect for such labor, passed from generation to generation, endures. Log drivers. Rivers once served as the lifeblood of the timber trade, carrying logs from forest to sawmill under the watchful eyes of men who learned to walk on water. These were the log drivers, gritty, agile, and intimately familiar with the pull of the current and the snap of splintered pine. They guided great rafts of timber with balance and grit, moving from log to log in a choreography dictated by nature and necessity. The river spoke in currents, and they answered with instinct. Their tools were simple: spiked boots, a peavey, and the will to endure. From Maine to the Pacific Northwest, they kept the timber flowing, clearing jams before they swallowed whole rivers. But the tracks of trains soon crept into the forests, and roads followed behind. Log driving, once a spectacle of raw endurance and local pride, gradually vanished from daily life. What remains is a quieter echo of men whose labor rode the rapids, holding steady the wild current of an industry and a way of life. Knocker-uppers. In the hushed hours when towns held their breath and street lamps burned low, a lone figure made the rounds, pole in hand, or a pouch of peas slung over the shoulder. They were the knocker-uppers, rising before the sun to rouse a slumbering world. Their task was simple: a tap on the glass, a gentle cue for the baker to light his ovens, the mill worker to lace his boots, or the conductor to head for the rail yard. They navigated alleyways and cobblestones with purpose, timing each visit to the rhythms of labor and routine. Every knock spoke of reliability, of lives shaped by human attention rather than machines. Though uncelebrated, their work kept cities humming, day after day. Over time, as mechanical clocks found their way into bedrooms and automation set the pace, the profession faded. Yet in stories from old neighborhoods, their presence endures, an emblem of a world where even the start of the day was once delivered with care. Rat catchers. Could urban life ever have flourished without someone brave enough to chase shadows under floorboards and beneath cobblestones? In the days when streets teemed with refuse and food storage was a daily gamble, the rat catcher was an unwelcome but essential visitor. He knew the crevices behind bakeries, the crawl spaces under stables, and the stories in the squeaks and scratches of rats. Armed with traps, poisons, and on occasion, a dog with a nose for trouble, he worked in alleyways and cellars where few dared linger. His tools were simple, but his instincts sharp. When plague loomed, he became a quiet force against catastrophe. Public health often rested on his shoulders, though recognition rarely followed. With time, the profession took a new shape. Clipboards replaced cudgels, and science offered cleaner methods. Yet the man who once hunted vermin on foot, lantern in hand, paved the way for every technician who now walks into a kitchen with a badge and a spray can. Chimney sweeps. On winter mornings in another century, smoke curled from rooftops not for beauty, but for survival. Fireplaces burned steadily, and chimneys, those narrow, soot-lined arteries of warmth, needed constant attention. The chimney sweep, often a boy small enough to slip between bricks, bore the weight of that responsibility. Covered in ash, he climbed flues with brushes and scrapers, clearing the residue that could spark disaster. His work reduced fires and kept air flowing, yet the price was steep. Falls were common. So were burns, suffocation, and diseases carried in the lungs for a lifetime. During the Industrial Revolution, the profession thrived, not from safety, but from necessity, relying on the labor of children who had few other choices. As technology advanced, so did conscience. Modern heating systems emerged, and with them came laws to protect those once pressed into darkness. Today, chimney sweeps still work, outfitted with harnesses and vacuums, but the old trade has faded from everyday life. What endures is the image of a narrow figure, high above the streets, doing a hard job so homes could stay warm. Typewriter repair technicians. What became of the man who could take apart a typewriter and put it back together without a diagram or delay? In the era when every sentence came by carriage return and every page bore the weight of keystrokes, typewriter repairmen stood behind the scenes. Quiet craftsmen who understood their machines the way a musician understands his instrument. Offices depended on their visits. Journalists called when the spacebar stuck. Secretaries welcomed them when a ribbon jammed mid-letter. Their fingers worked through grime and graphite, tightening springs, adjusting type bars, fine-tuning platen rollers until every letter struck clean. From heavy desktop underwoods to sleek electrics, buzzing beneath fluorescent lights, these technicians kept words moving forward. But times shifted. Computers entered quietly, then stayed. As screens replaced spools, shops shuttered. The trade, once essential, fell behind glass with the machines it served. Yet their work hasn't disappeared. Every restored typewriter sitting in a collector's den or antique shop carries their mark. Each letter stamped with the care of someone who once kept the written world turning, one key at a time. Carriage drivers. City streets once moved to the rhythm of hooves and wheels, a cadence set by men seated high on wooden benches with reins in hand and patience in their bones. Carriage drivers knew every bend in the road, every shortcut behind the bakery, every bump that might unsettle a passenger or shift a load. Their trade served the banker in his bowler hat, the flower vendor on her way to market, the newlyweds leaving the chapel. By day, they delivered freight. By night, they waited outside music halls, their horses snorting steam beneath gas lamps. Each journey required skill, not only in steering, but in managing animals through crowded intersections and uneven brickwork. As the 20th century gained speed, engines grew louder and the stables grew quieter. Some drivers traded leather reins for a steering column, adapting without ceremony. Others stepped away, their craft parked with the carriages. The city changed its pace, but for generations, the road belonged to them, measured not in miles per hour, but in the calm certainty of knowing how to get a person home. Do you have a family story tied to any of these fading professions? We'd love to hear it. Matchstick makers. Factories once buzzed not with machines, but with the shuffle of weary feet and the haze of phosphorus fumes. Matchstick makers, mostly girls and young women, sat in rows, dipping wood slivers into vats of chemicals under dim lamps and long shifts. The air hung heavy with risk, yet wages were barely enough to keep bread on the table. White phosphorus brought light to households, but also disfigurement to the workers, scarring jaws and shortening lives. In 1888, a line was drawn. Dozens of match girls in East London walked out, not with anger, but with resolve. Their protest, born of hardship and sustained by solidarity, pushed their story into public view. Newspapers picked it up. Parliament took notice. Slowly, change followed. Laws began to shift. Safer methods emerged. What began as a quiet strike became a rallying cry, one that helped shape early labor protections. Today, their courage stands as a testament not only to resilience, but to the belief that dignity at work should never be too much to ask. Daguerreotype photographers. What did it mean to hold still, truly still, for a portrait made of silver and patience? In the middle of the 19th century, when photography stood at the edge of wonder and invention, the daguerreotype photographer earned his place in the quiet corners of history. With gloved hands and a craftsman's eye, he polished copper plates until they gleamed, bathed them in fumes that carried risk, and watched as an image slowly appeared beneath a sheet of glass. His studio was no place for rush or distraction. It was a workshop for preserving presence. Families sat for long exposures, their eyes locked in gaze, their stories sealed in metal. Each portrait carried weight, a single copy for a lifetime. And as new technologies took root and the business of photographs turned quicker, that old process, so painstaking and proud, slipped out of favor. But in those frames, tarnished and true, one can study the care of a man who worked with light as if it were ink, and time as if it stood still. Leech collectors. Fog settled low on the marshlands, and a figure moved slowly through the reeds, water lapping at her calves. She wasn't looking for fish or frogs, but something far more lucrative in the world of 19th century medicine: leeches. These gatherers, often women scraping by on the margins of rural life, endured biting cold and hungry insects for the hope of coins. With hems soaked and legs exposed, they became the bait, letting the creatures cling so they could be plucked and sold to apothecaries. Each jar carried the weight of hard-earned survival. Hospitals across continents demanded them, believing they could purge illness with blood. The trade peaked with the centuries turning, and soon the balance tipped. Overharvesting and drained wetlands meant fewer leeches and fewer collectors. As medicine turned to microscopes and syringes, the old ways receded. The profession dissolved, not with ceremony, but with silence, leaving behind footprints in the bog and stories in the breeze. If these stories bring back many memories, don't hesitate to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share your personal memories of Vegas in the comments below. We always love to hear your stories. See you in the next video, where we will continue our journey to discover fascinating things forgotten in the past.